Okay, colleagues, we are in a situation where we may continue to have some audio problems with the YouTube live stream, but I've been advised by the clerks that it is being recorded in Zoom as well. We do have an audio recording of it, and we will be working to fix any technical difficulties with the recording and make sure that that audio is available to people if they're not receiving it currently. So we're going to move ahead with the remainder of the agenda. As I said, we have no scheduled items, so we move on to items for direction. We have one item for direction, 4.1. There was a request for delegation status, which has been withdrawn, and then added a new delegation status for Mr. Benedict for a public notice amendment. So the added is 4.1A, and I'll look to see how committee wants to deal with this. Your worship.
Thanks. I'm prepared to move hearing the delegation, Mr. Benedict.
Thank you. And I saw Councillor Cassidy's hand was up as well. Councillor Cassidy, will you second that?
I will, Mr. Chair, and wondering if Mr. Benedict is here today as well.
He is in the Zoom meeting with us. Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder. We'll just call the vote on opening the delegation or receiving the delegation.
Closing the vote, that motion's carried 6-0.
Thank you. So Mr. Benedict, I understand you're with us on the Zoom meeting, and the clerks will get this open for you so that you can join us, and you'll have 5 minutes for your delegation. And the clerks say you should be good to go as soon as you're ready.
Okay. First of all, thank you for receiving me. I'm following up on an issue that sadly it first started 2 years ago with municipal lot number 10. It was approved by parking, but did not go through a public consultation process. The people in parking actually went to Mr. Katolik and asked, is this proper? And he told them not to do it, yet they proceeded anyways. So in the process, on January 7th, 2020, Civic Works Committee moved that Civic Administration will consult with area residents through a public participation meeting and site plan process on proposed new municipal parking lots. However, when it actually came to writing the legislation, the public participation component was removed. And to me, that seems critical to what we're trying to accomplish here. And it's the reason why our community has been up in arms and why this has been such a dismal failure on our part. The proposed property owner, and we're talking at Mill Street and John Street, St. George Street, right in the new entertainment district. The property owner spent tens of thousands of dollars. Me and my neighbors lost hours of sleep because of the violence going on in this parking lot. It took me years to be able to regain use of my yard again. Now, why I trust Mr. Katolik in saying when everything new comes up, he'll look after it, but he won't be there forever. And the original problem was that city staff ignored his recommendations in the first place. So there's a trust issue with amongst the public and city staff and city council. And I'm asking you to rebuild that trust by putting back that public consultation process into the guidelines for this. This public policy process is really important. Look at the difference. When the SEEPs asked for a similar process, there was a public consultation process. Our community asked for a burn. There's a lovely little green space now along John Street, and there's a privacy fence between the businesses and the community. If there had been a public process with this process, we would have asked for similars. We would have also supported this process because this is an area that needs public parking. And in both instances, city staff and city council and this committee failed our community in every respect. So what I'm asking for you to simply do is to restore our faith in the process and in our community by re-adding in that public consultation process. Private developers have to do it. Why should not the city? This is a partnership between the citizens and its municipality And we're asking the corporation of the City of London to be good partners in that and to restore the good faith that our city deserves and needs. Plain and simple. I can go into all the violations and all the problems it's cost thousands of dollars in my time that's been wasted on this because the city wouldn't do what it would do. So again, the simple ask is go back to that. And when the city puts out any proposals, add a public participation process. It makes a world of difference. Because we would have had a parking lot if the city hadn't tried to lie its way through this process.
Mr. Benedict, I'm just going to caution you. I'm not sure if you have more to add, but it would be something that I would have an issue with the language in terms of the city lying. That may be misrepresenting what's happened here. But I wanted to just advise that would be language that I would be concerned about continuing. But by all means, if you have anything further to add, and I haven't taken my time away from your time, so I just want to check and see if you've got anything further that you'd like to share with us.
No, that was pretty it, Mr. Lewis. It really goes back to this parking division, not following through, not doing what they should have done in an ethical manner. The problem was they had a budget shortfall, and rather than make up their budget in other ways, they tried to fast track this through at this community's expense. And that's what I mean by that sort of backhandedness. They weren't forthcoming and honest at the proposal stage, and when they were told not to do it, they went and did it anyways, much to the detriment of this community. This has been 2 years of my time, 2 years of my community's time, and thousands of dollars by the property owner and we lost our tree cover over this. There were so many things went wrong when it could have been done right if we only had that public participation process in place. That's all I'm asking. At that meeting in January 2020, 2 years ago, this is what this committee had promised. We're simply asking you to do what you promised to do. And don't put that back on the council or back onto staff again, because it really is council's decision. And we really are asking for the public participation process in all new developments. Thank you for your time and your consideration on behalf of myself, my community, my neighbors, and the property owner who had vested interest in this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benedict. And right on time, we finished at 4 minutes and 59 seconds. So thank you for staying within your time.
I tried to do my best. Thank you.
Okay, committee, I will look to see if you have some direction you might want to take on this, or we will need to vote to receive it, of course. We'll see if there's any other discussion or direction that you want to have on this item. And I see Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much. Acknowledge Mr. Benedict's comments. They were fairly laced with, I think, aggressive language that I think impugns staff and council for that matter. And I don't think it would be inappropriate at the right time. And you'll tell me, Chair, if this is the right time to ask a question, Mr. Katolik.
This is absolutely the right time, Your Worship. So by all means, ask your question.
Often statements are made, Chair, that whether sometimes council or whether it's members of the public in this, where staff did not have an opportunity to respond. But I think it was such a stinging indictment that I wonder if Mr. Katolik has any response, because I've always appreciated his forthrightness, and may he live forever. But having said that, I would be grateful for any comments he could add that would help the discussion.
Thank you, and through the chair. Mr. Benedict's comments were fraught with inaccuracies. This matter was before Civic Works Committee on 2 separate occasions, once in March 2019. That was a public session. Again, in January 2020. Once again, that was a public session. And in January 2020, I publicly indicated that any new private parking lots that we're requesting to be municipally managed and operated would go through a public site plan review. This matter was once again before this committee in March 2021, where I reiterated my comment that any new advancement of a private parking lot would go through a public site plan review. And at that time, Mr. Chair, the committee provided direction to staff to amend the public notification process, which I can confirm that the city clerk did do. And since that time, we have had 0 requests from anyone who owns a private parking lot to have it municipally operated and managed. I'm not going to get into the number of inaccuracies in Mr. Benedict's comments, and I'm also not going to be discussing any enforcement actions which we may or may not be taking, other than stating that this is an active enforcement file. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Katolik. And I think for all members, it's important to recognize that when it comes to enforcement matters, all that would be shared publicly is that it's an active file. Your worship, did you have any follow-up questions?
Not of Mr. Katolik, but I appreciated Mr. Benedict bringing his perspective forward, and it's my sincere hope that he will take what Mr. Katolik has shared, because I think we want to work on the best information as council members as we can, and I think it's important that if there's genuine concerns, always bring them forward. If there's perceptions, then that's fair too. But I thought that Mr. Benedict's comments were fairly aggressive. But having said it, I'm grateful that he brought them forward, and more that Mr. Katolik, I think, has rightly responded, and I thank him as well.
Thank you, Mayor Holder. Looking to committee for any other questions or comments. I've got Councillor Fife Miller and then Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. First, I want to say I really appreciate the comments from Mr. Katolik on this issue. I think listening to some of Mr. Benedict's comments, I agree with the mayor. I think some of them were a little bit aggressive. I know there are frustrations in North Talbot that have to do with a lot of things other than the municipal lot. So there are challenges there, and I think that there are issues, and sometimes I think those issues culminate to bubble up in situations such as this. But what I would say is I do appreciate the perspective. I do appreciate the perspective from city staff on where we are, and the fact that this is still an ongoing issue that's being dealt with. So I think it is very helpful. Again, the mayor said, I think it's good that these situations sometimes come to light, because I think it gives the community an opportunity. But like I say, I'm very happy and very supportive of the fact that these issues are being dealt with. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fife Miller. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to agree with what Councillor Fife Miller just said as well. It's important that that people work with their ward councillor when they have these kinds of issues. And you know, I know sometimes people don't necessarily agree with the ward councillor, or as we know, this is an active ongoing file that that we aren't privy to the details right now because it is an active file. And so sometimes people get frustrated with that. But I encourage not just this Talbot community to continue to work with Councillor Fife Miller, but all communities in these kinds of situations. Your ward councillor is your best help in navigating the process, whatever it may be. I'm especially glad to hear from Mr. Katolik that the changes we requested have not been changed or watered down or anything like that. I'm really pleased with that. And in the past, it really was the stance of the municipality when there were these kinds of disputes between two private property owners, that the city really just stayed out of it. And we are rather, I'm not seeing the municipality wanting to come in to police every issue, every dispute between neighbors, but I am happy to see a more active role in a number of things. We recently amended the pool fence bylaw because of the kinds of problems that sometimes arise when a neighbor puts in a pool and it changes drainage and flooding issues on neighboring properties. The city used to stay, right out of that. And now with changes made to the pool fence bylaw, some of those issues can be addressed. Other kinds of disputes like that, the city is taking a little bit more of an active role. And I think that is a good thing. There is a point where it really is between neighbors and they have to deal with it. But this one in particular, I am pleased that the city is A, going ahead with changes, and B, continuing to investigate what went on in this particular situation, because it really was an unfortunate situation. And I do feel for Mr. Benedict. I do have grave concerns about the kinds of things that he had to put up with. But I'm happy that staff are still looking into it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. If committee will indulge for me to ask just 2 quick questions from the chair. I do have 2 quick questions for our staff. And I promise that in the future, once we've had a chance to chat offline about how we'll handle this, I'll leave the chair and let the vice chair take over. But for today, just to Mr. Katolik, how frequently typically is the city asked to manage a private parking lot? How often would a situation like this typically, and I know I'm asking you to speculate a little bit, but how frequent is it?
Through the chair, over the last decade or so, we may have been asked 1 or 2 times, and this was one of the properties.
Okay, thank you for that. So it's not a particularly common occurrence, and we heard that it hasn't happened since the last time that this issue was before this committee. My other question quickly is to the clerks, and just very briefly, are we currently meeting or exceeding the public notification or the notification circulation requirements on these situations?
Through the chair, I'm not aware of any requirement for circulation outside of any policies that the city may develop itself. As Mr. Katolik had noted, the public notice policy was amended this year to provide for notice when the notice requirement reads as follows: public notice to advise of intention to implement new municipally managed private commercial parking lots. And that requires notice in accordance with that policy now.
Thank you, clerk. So we have in fact had that policy amended so that public notice will be occurring when a situation like this arises. So with those questions answered, I'll just look to committee for a motion to receive, moved by Councillor Hamou, seconded by Councillor Fife Miller. And we'll open that vote in just a moment.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank you, clerk. And the next item on our agenda is deferred matters, additional business. We had one added to our agenda. That's 5.1, the 2021 Accessibility Compliance Report. And I'll look to committee for a mover and seconder on that. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Fife Miller. And look for any discussion on that while the clerks prepare that vote. Seeing none, I'm just going to comment very quickly that it's good to see that the compliance report indicated all areas are in compliance with the exception of web accessibility. And I know staff continue to work on that. So we'll just see if the clerk has that vote ready. And we're going to open that vote now.
Before we do, can I just have a brief comment?
You certainly can, Your Worship. And I also have Councillor Hamou raising her hand too. So we'll go to you first and then to Councillor Hamou.
I apologize, Chair. I didn't mean to speak after the chair. But I just want to give a shout out to Ms. Morris in providing the accessibility compliance report. You know, when she was put in this position at the recommendation of our city manager, I think a lot of eyes have been on our director of anti-racism and anti-oppression, and I think what this does, this information here, and we have the summary, but we also have the background beyond it, I think shows the level of seriousness this council and the city take these issues around racism and issues around oppression. And I just want to say thank you to Ms. Morris. This is an important report and a great, I think, starting point for a number of things that we'll be dealing with in the years to come as a council. So I just want to tip my hat to her for getting this, putting this in place, and the responses that she has made within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Holder and Councillor Hamou.
Thank you so much, Chair Lewis. I'm just wondering if we're doing newsletters, like ward newsletters, if they can also be vetted through this process as well, because it is going to our constituents who do, you know, they may have disabilities in terms of visual or learning disabilities. I know my daughter's dyslexic, so she can't get material in the same way as other people. So would we be able to vet our newsletters and any communications that we personally have as in our wards through this process? Thank you.
Well, I think that that's a great question, Councillor Hamou, and we actually have Ms. Stone in the meeting with us, so perhaps we can ask her to provide a response to that.
Hello, and thank you. Through the chair, we absolutely would be happy to work with you on your newsletters. If you wanted to reach out for me, I can work with your staff to train and also scan those at any time. I think we've started that process through the councillor's office last year. Everyone seemed really keen on having everything looked at properly. So happy to continue that with your office and your staff.
Great, thank you for that, Ms. Stone. Councillor Hamou, anything further?
Maybe one other thing, is this also being worked through all of our communications in terms of the AODA compliance? Because I've had messages in the past from constituents that some of the stuff that we leave at their doors, seniors won't be able to read it. It's not clear. The language is written like a rule as opposed to like a communication. So I'm hoping that that is also going to be translated through our communications department, and those things will be met. I'm just wondering if there's any sort of impetus to do that at present. Thank you. Through the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamou. And I think I'll just perhaps, hopefully, maybe focus this just a little bit. Ms. Stone, I think what I'm hearing Councillor Hamou referring to specifically are the notices that we may be getting from road operations or water operations that services may be temporarily disrupted due to work. And I certainly know that those can be written in a bit of a legal language. Is there work happening around making those more accessible for communications?
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, there is. We're working with staff on plain language recommendations all the time, and also just making sure that we're always responsive to those needs. So whether it's large print, braille, audio file, or even calling my office to have something described or recorded audibly, I'm happy to do that. So we are in that process. Our communications team looks at everything from accessibility first, so it isn't a request after the fact. Some communications don't go out through that team, however, so we just want to be sure that everyone is scanning for accessibility and using appropriate language, plain language, and large print font whenever required.
Great, thank you for that. And I've got Councillor Morgan on the speakers list next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And on the heels of Councillor Hamou's comments, I want to say thank you to Ms. Stone for the help that she's given me in the past related to some communications that I've put out, including some stuff via the FCM that she's been willing, able, and very helpful with ensuring compliance with. So not only I think is that available as she's confirmed, but certainly I've had the advantage of using it in the past. My question, though, is about the website content. So, and I would love to be corrected if I'm wrong, but there are obviously two ways to approach the compliance issue. One is transition the content into a compliant state. Two is pull down some content that may not be compliant to bring yourself into compliance as you rebuild and rework that content. And so my question is, because I know I've come across it a few times with the new website, and something that I know was there before, I now can't find, or maybe the content hasn't been regenerated. So my question for staff is that indeed the case? And are we actively rebuilding compliant content that was there before? And if so, how is that work going, and the pace and speed at which? Because I certainly know that the content we provide on our website is a service. It's great to have. We want it to be compliant. But I'm also conscious that sometimes takes time, and I've noticed that myself. So, and if I'm wrong on that, I'm happy to be corrected, but I'd love to have those questions answered through the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Ms. Stone, I don't know if the website accessibility is something you can respond to, but I see Ms. Livingston has joined us and has her hand up, so I perhaps will look to the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me. I wish to address the approach to the website, and then perhaps Ms. Stone can assist me in terms of the accessibility component of it. When the website was being redesigned, there was a very conscious decision made about not just making it new with all the same old information. And so a lot of research was done on what information the public generally accesses. And that was the priority for what was put onto the new website. So I just wanted to reiterate that, because it may be that not every single document that was there before would come back on. Certainly any document that is on there or being brought back on to the new website must meet the accessibility standard. And so there may be something that is delayed because of that component. But I just wanted to be clear that we weren't putting everything before back onto the new website. We were trying to be very customer driven in terms of the vast majority of things that people were looking for. I don't know if Ms. Stone would like to add anything from an accessibility component to my comments there.
Well, let's ask her. Ms. Stone, did you want to pick up where the city manager left off on the website accessibility components?
Yes, thank you through the chair. We did take a bit of a different approach. So some things that were documents before were actually put into HTML format. So that's changed the way people access it, easier to come up in searches. Our goal was not to, make it really difficult to find things, but actually easier to find things. So that process is, I think we're nearly complete. Nothing is on our website right now that is not WCAG compliant, unless it was predated the requirements of 2012. So we've just been a little bit more conscious of how we share information instead of just putting up a bunch of PDFs or reports, is just think, how can we share this as accessibly as possible? And HTML is accessible. So building that right into the structure. I think our communications department could give a better summary, but we've certainly been actively still remediating older reports or going through the process where a report, it's a timely report that is coming up for renewal anyway. And so putting that on once that is done.
Great, thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, that process makes a ton of sense to me. And I do appreciate when we redid the website that obviously we wanted to provide content that was highly used and of value, because you need to ensure the maintenance of that content as well. So that makes a lot of sense. And if for the pieces that I mentioned that people have been asking about, I think that my best approach on that is to pass that on to our staff to see if it is appropriate content to be added to the new website or not, or whether there are alternative ways of accessing that information, which there usually is. These aren't significant or large scale things, so I'm not surprised that as we rejigged our content based on customer experience, that some of it might drop off, and that's okay. I also appreciate the other answers that were given, and I certainly am glad that we have moved as quickly as we possibly could have to bring ourselves into compliance, and obviously the other items are in progress. So I'm happy with this update, and I appreciate the answers to my questions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have no other speakers, so we will open the vote on receiving the added accessibility compliance report.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Okay, colleagues, the last item on our agenda is confidential, so I will look for a motion to go in camera. The reason being 6.1 is a land acquisition, solicitor client privilege device position, plan procedure criteria or instruction to be applied to any negotiation, a matter pertaining to the proposed or pending acquisition of land by the municipality. Moved by Councillor Fife Miller, seconded by the mayor. And we'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
And colleagues, we'll just need a couple of moments to shuffle the chairs, as it were, and get the appropriate individuals into the closed session.
Chair, is it our intention to close from public session or go back into or private, to go from confidential to private, or are we going to adjourn from closed session?
We do have to come back out and adjourn from public session, Your Worship.
Thank you.
And we are back in public session. I will call on the committee vice chair to report out on the in-camera matter.
Chair, through you, I'd like to report that progress was made on matters that we went into closed session for.
Thank you. And we'll just look for a, sorry, clerk, do we need a motion to receive that? No, we do not. So we will just look now for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Fife Miller, seconded by Councillor Hamou. And we can do that as a hand vote. All those in favor?
And that motion is passed.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the great discussion at our first meeting of this committee, and I'll see you all again. Actually, not until the new year, because this is the last committee before the end of 2021. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.